The year is 2669, the last year of the Kilrathi War. Thanks to the disastrous choices the Terran Confederation government had made during what came to be known as the False Armistice, humanity was on the verge of losing their decades-long war against the Kilrathi Empire. Again. But this time, it seemed as if there would be no last-minute Hail Mary plays that would avert the subjugation and possible extinction of the human race. Perhaps motivated by desperation, Confed Navy and Space Forces began developing more advanced spacecraft designs to defend their imperiled territory, all in the slim hope that they could delay the subjugation of humanity until new plans and initiatives within the Confederation could be brought to bear. As a result, venerable and effective designs like the Ferret, the Saber, and the Rapier were forced to give way to new designs such as the Arrow, the Thunderbolt 7, and our topic for today, the HELLCAT 5. Like the F-44 Rapier Gs before it, the HELLCAT was meant to fill the medium fighter role, which meant that it was to be a jack of all trades yet master of none. There are two variants of the HELLCAT seen in Confed space starting in 2669 and onward, the Kilrathi War HELLCAT and the post-war HELLCAT. There is no official name distinction between the two, but there are some differences between them worth noting. The original HELLCAT 5, as stated before, was able to do everything at levels ranging from competent to good for a multi-role fighter. And because of its versatility, the HELLCAT was considered to be the baseline Terran fighter, presumably meaning that all other Terran starfighters were compared to it in flight and combat performance. Such a distinction was due in large part to the HELLCAT's speed and maneuverability. Granted, it was not comparable to that of the much faster Arrow light fighter. The HELLCAT was still able to outmatch, or at least compete with, many Terran starfighters past and present. Its maximum velocity was rated at 420 km per second, which was then increased greatly with afterburners pushing the velocity up to 1200 km per second. For the HELLCAT's maneuverability, it had a maximum yaw, pitch, and roll of 60 degrees per second, and an acceleration of 225 km per second squared. In defense, the HELLCAT of 2669 had shields rated for 220 cm armor equivalent at all sides. As for its actual armor, it was rated at 100 cm thickness fore and aft, and 80 cm port and starboard, which made the CAT fairly well armored compared to its Kilrathi equivalent, the Drelthi 4, which had a laughable armor rating of 80 cm fore and aft, and 60 cm port and starboard. These were then combined with shields that had a mere 120 cm armor equivalency. But on the other hand, Kilrathi forces often made up for their technology gap with massed fighter numbers. Then there are the guns and missiles. HELLCATs were often seen with a pair of ion guns that could be used to disable targets, which was paired with short-ranged but powerful twin neutron guns. As for missiles, it had 6 hardpoints for a variety of different ordnance, but typically the HELLCAT was often outfitted with spiculum image recognition missiles. The post-war period saw some drastic reductions in both the Terran Confederation Navy and Space Forces. Obviously, since humanity's continued existence was no longer threatened, there was less need to have such a large number of standing forces. These new policies did affect the HELLCAT, but despite what could be assumed during a time of force reduction, the HELLCAT actually got enhanced with better technology, perhaps as a result of Confed accountants and leadership wanting to squeeze as much value as they could out of existing spacecraft. So the HELLCAT at this time had its shields upgraded to 250 cm armor equivalent, and the neutron guns swapped out for the newer particle cannons to complement the fighter's current ion guns. The particle cannons had roughly the same stopping power as the older neutrons, but traveled at much greater ranges. Other statistics regarding the HELLCAT's armor, speed, and maneuverability remained the same. Curiously though, in a general information file compiled by Chief Technician Rachel Coriolis of the TCS Victory, she stated that particle cannons were useless in atmospheric conditions, which would be fine, normally, but the thing is, the HELLCAT was a fighter designed with the ability to engage in atmospheric combat. Granted, this file was compiled in mid-2669 nearer to the end of the war, so it's possible this limitation was somehow circumvented afterwards by the time of the Border Worlds crisis. On the topic of in-atmosphere operations, the HELLCAT could do just that, with the only other fighter of 2669 confirmed to do the same being the F-103 Excalibur. This ability was used to great effect during the start of the Border Worlds crisis, when Colonel Christopher Blair would use the HELLCAT to rescue a scientist being held by the Union of Border Worlds in the Tier system. Here, Blair undertook 2 separate missions to liberate the hostage from the main planet in Tier, the first being a reconnaissance mission to investigate the facility she was being held in, and the second was a mission to escort a Marine detachment down to the aforementioned planet and rescue the captive scientist. Here, the HELLCAT demonstrated a number of its wide array of abilities, such as fighter-to-fighter combat in both space and planet side, scouting, escort duty, and even air-to-ground assault. But the Kilrathi War model HELLCAT was able to do the same, with the one confirmed report being when Lieutenant Winston Vagabond Chang piloted a HELLCAT down to Alcor 5 where the rescue of Dr. Severin, the inventor of the Temblor bomb, was underway. Vagabond did this for only one reason. He wanted to punch Dr. Severin in the face. No, really, that's what happened. Vagabond used to work under Dr. Severin as a pilot doing highly classified and morally dubious work for Confed. Rather than wait until the rescue Marines brought him back aboard the Victory, Vagabond chose the totally logical path and decided to greet him on the prison planet. HELLCATs were also spotted during the time of the early 2650s during a holographic training simulation at the Confederation Space Force Academy, where future legendary pilots Christopher Maverick Blair and Todd Maniac Marshall used the HELLCATs. And, well, okay, so there's no in-universe explanation why there's Wing Commander 3 fighters in Wing Commander Academy, a show that takes place before the events of the first Wing Commander game. But what we do know is that Wing Commander Academy was originally supposed to be set just before the events of WC3, but at some point as production on the TV series began, it was changed to much earlier in the timeline. So that's why we see HELLCATs there and nowhere else in future episodes. Some in the community posit a theory that they're actually Wildcats, a fighter mentioned in the novel Wing Commander Action Stations, which chronicled the Battle of McAuliffe in 2634, far before any of the games. By then, the Wildcat was an outdated fighter due for a massive upgrade, so by the time of the early 2650s, they most likely would be perfect candidates for future Space Force pilots to train in. For those interested in some light reading, Ben Bandit Loaf Lesnick, keeper of lost and arcane Wing Commander trivia, has an article on the Wing Commander CIC that goes into a really deep dive rabbit hole about the Wildcat and their theoretical relationship to the HELLCAT. And by rabbit hole, I do mean just that. It's actually well worth reading through. Normally I wouldn't break this sorta kinda in-universe-ish narration I usually do, but I know this would come up if I didn't mention it here. And explaining it in the commentary boxes I've used in previous videos to be snarky or add notes probably wouldn't cut it either. Also, it helps pad out the video. A true workhorse of the Confederation Space Forces, the HELLCAT may have been overshadowed by the debut of the Excalibur, and its reputation among pilots may not have had enough time to grow and solidify as its predecessor, the Rapier, had, but none of that detracts from what the HELLCAT was, a solid, dependable warfighting platform that helped to safeguard humanity.